Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled are Howard Teichman and filmmaker Gabor Kalman. Howard Teichman was born in Toronto and raised between Chicago and LA. He says he should own a moving and van storage company because he was moving back and forth so much. But once he earned his bachelor's and his MFA from UCLA in theater, I think it was LA for good, wasn't it?
That's right, LA for good. Who wants to go back to the winter weather of Chicago?
He's currently artistic director for the West Coast Jewish Theater and is collaborating on a play, Love, with Theater 40. That friendship goes way back, doesn't it, Howard?
Right, it goes back to the mid-90s. As a matter of fact, the artistic director at that time called me in to do a melodrama. They didn't have anybody to direct a melodrama, so I did a play called Orphans of the Storm, which was based on the movie with Lillian Gish.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I actually adapted it.
Was it silent film or was it?
It was the silent version, but I adapted it for the stage. I actually wrote words. Anyways.
Oh, you did?
Yes. So that's my start with Theater 40 in Beverly Hills.
But UCLA must have been a very fertile ground for you because you were working with writers and actors and different people.
Yes.
And you started a company called what?
I started a company called Laugh Factory Ensemble, which actually wound up working at the Laugh Factory. And we were an improvisational troupe, and we worked there in the mid-'80s. And that was sort of my graduation present to myself when I graduated from UCLA.
Were those friends of yours from the theater department?
Actually, no, because this was a whole other thing. But then I was a teacher at UCLA as well. And so what I did was there was a group of guys who were trying to emulate the Actors Gang.
Oh, right. Is that Buffalo Nights?
Buffalo Nights, absolutely.
Right. Oh, so that's what it was.
Yes, and so this group of guys decided they wanted to do a play called Salome by Oscar Wilde, and they asked me to come in and direct it, and so I did.
So you weren't a part of it? You weren't acting with Buffalo Nights?
No, I was their director.
Oh, I see, I see.
But
so have you only directed on stage?
No, I used to be a performer too. I used to work at Second City in Chicago, and I was an actor in town here for a number of years, and worked in, like at the Odyssey, and worked at the LAAT, and did different shows.
When you were in Chicago, they have a fantastic theater, right?
Terrific.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
But was that after you had graduated? Were you going back and forth
No.
then?
As a matter of fact, when I was in Chicago, I was a young man. I was about 18, 19 years old. And I was working at Second City. And the wife of the owner of Second City took me under her wing. And she mentored me to become a director.
Oh, that's how. So you didn't go to a directing class?
No, I started, actually what it was, there was a young writer at the time who wanted his new play done in Chicago, and he was a Chicago writer, and it was David Mamet.
Oh.
And he was like...
Is that right? You were there at that time?
Yeah, it was. I was. He was.
And William Macy was in there studying?
Actually, William, that's way before. This is way before William Macy ever got involved.
Is that right?
Yes. As a matter of fact, this was an independent play that he put up at a small theater in Chicago.
Oh, that's great.
And Fritzi Solens, who was the director at the time, she asked me to come in and be the assistant director. And I learned an awful lot from that experience.
So that was on-the-job training.
You bet. That's how I started this, on-the-job training. You
also were on-the-job training when you worked at the Mark Taper with Gordon Davidson.
That's correct.
You must have learned a lot from him.
Oh my gosh. Being his intern for 2 years was just a wonderful experience taught me so much about what theater is all about.
He's fantastic, isn't he?
He's, you know what it is? He's a very giving man, and he gives you of your time, and he's a good teacher. For instance, I remember one time I was on the producing team of Jelly's Last Jam, and George C. Wolfe was the director. And he brought in a designer from New York, and he has this, you know, kind of mock representation of the stage. And he presents it to Gordon, and the guy says to him, well, this is going to cost you $2 million. Oh. That's how much the set was going to be. And Gordon looks at it, and he starts fiddling with it. He takes this away, he takes that away, takes this away. Next thing you know, I think now it's $1 million. That's what he said.
But George Wolfe came from the Public Theater, was that
well,
it?
He had not been at the Public Theater at that time.
I see.
After that play was done in New York, he got the job at the Public.
Oh, it was. So I think that those sets went down a little bit in price.
Yes,
they couldn't
did.
afford that kind of money
Well,
for
Gordon
sets,
taught
right?
me. Gordon taught me how to be minimal about things and only use things that you absolutely have to need.
And that's what you need when you're working at the West Coast Jewish Theater.
Oh my goodness, yes, absolutely. I was the producer for the West Coast Jewish Theater for about 2 years, and then the artistic director, Herb Isaacs, retired, and I was just naturally kind of brought in to be the artistic director.
Do we have to call it the West Coast Jewish Theater? Is there an East Coast?
There was an
mid-country,
that's right.
mid-U.S. Jewish Theater.
Actually, the founder of the West Coast Jewish Theater, Naomi Jacobs, she came up with the title, and there was an East Coast Jewish Theater, but now that's defunct in New York, and so we are the West Coast Jewish Theater. And you know, for having the second largest population of Jews in the United States.
In L.A.?
In L.A., you know, we try to service and serve and entertain that population.
Okay, so let's hear, what is the Jewish Theater?
Well, the West Coast Jewish Theater is a theater that their mission statement is basically to provide Jewish entertainment and Jewish experience entertainment for an audience, but also bringing universal themes to the theater as well. So we reach out to a larger community.
Do you use people who are non-Jews
Absolutely.
for their writing ability or their
Absolutely. In fact,
acting ability?
Absolutely. In fact, we just closed a show, Broken Glass by Arthur Miller. And that show ended about a week ago, and it was recommended by the LA Times, and we got great reviews in the entire, on all the media outlets. People came and loved it.
But Arthur Miller's Jewish.
Arthur Miller is Jewish, the play is Jewish. We only had one Jew in the cast.
Well, that's what I think is the interesting thing.
Yes.
And who directed it?
Alina DeSantos.
And she's not Jewish.
She's not Jewish. But I was there to help guide her.
to make sure.
To provide her that little Jewish oomph.
Well, what is that? What do you need to do that?
Well, certainly you must grow up in a Jewish home, and you must have the experiences and the traditions.
But I mean, is that in the writing?
Yes, it is in the writing.
Yeah,
most of the time it's in the writing, and clearly, but Alina had a great sense of the play and a great sense of the characters.
Well, she has community. All the Jewishness is a community.
That's right.
And we all have our own communities.
Listen, every group of people has guilt. They have shopping things they do. So
and all kinds of problems.
You bet. That's the universal stuff.
Exactly.
Yes.
So as artistic director, we heard one thing that you do. You kind of come in and keep an eye on what's going on. What else are your duties?
Well, my duties is to select the season.
Oh, you do?
So I select the plays that we do. For instance, last year, I selected 3 shows. We did Value of Names by Jeffrey Sweet. We did Sarah by Daniel Goldfarb. And then we did Last of the Red Hot Lovers by Neil Simon.
Oh.
And all 3 of them were received very well, got critical good reviews, and audiences enjoyed it. And our new season is we're doing Broken Glass by Arthur Miller, which just closed. Love by Murray Shiskel, which opens May 18th.
So you do plays that have already, they're not premieres.
Well, we try to find premieres of new shows by new writers. We're always on the lookout for that.
You are. What comes after Love? Let's finish that so I can
Mark Herlich's The Immigrant, the musical, which is going to be performed at the Pico Playhouse.
Do you do everything at the Pico Playhouse?
Actually, Yes, we do, most of the
Because
time.
that's a great little stage and a
it's terrific.
fabulous area. I love it.
But this one production we're doing, Love, is a co-production with Theater 40. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm reaching out to other theaters because the cost of doing theater is so expensive. And to help reduce the burden of it, if you do a co-production with another theater, it helps reduce their budget.
So you learned that from Gordon.
I learned that, yes, I
Gordon
learned that from
Davidson,
Gordon.
bless him.
And a lot of times what happens is you're able to commingle the subscribers.
Do you change? Yeah, that's a great idea too.
Yes,
but
yes.
do you change venues? Do you play one venue then the other?
No. Everything is at Theater 40.
Oh,
And
it's all at Theater 40,
it's all
which
gonna
is
be-
over at Beverly Hills High School?
Yes.
And that's easy to get to too.
Absolutely. It's and they have underground parking, so you don't have to worry about the streets or meters or
It's
anything
free
like
park,
It's
yes, I
free
know.
parking, yeah.
Oh, so after Love,
Again, Mark Herelick's The Immigrant, the musical.
so how do you do a musical? Where's the music come from? Is it taped?
Well, no. We're actually going to have a pianist and a violinist
Oh, that's
on stage.
great.
We're going to have like a two-piece call it two-piece band.
Yeah.
And just it's enough music to give the flavor of the melodies, and it's a very strong score. There's really only 5 or 6 songs to the entire musical, but what the play represents is the story of a family that immigrates to the United States and moves to a small town in Texas. And then
And they're usually alone, aren't they?
Yes,
in
they are.
those cities.
In those
or
cities.
those little communities.
Yes, they are. But this is a story about reaching out to a Christian family.
Yeah.
And so again, it becomes a bridge story. And anytime I can do something like that.
Have you directed big Jewish stars or big Jewish playwrights is Arthur Miller. We know
Right,
that
yes,
those are.
yes.
But what about stars?
Well, I did my Value of Names. I got to work with Peter Mark Richmond and Malachi Throne. I don't know if you know them, but if you saw
I know them.
yes,
They're fabulous.
They're fabulous.
Peter Mark is wonderful.
Wonderful. It was a great experience to work with him. And it's hard to get. We've worked with Hal Linden
Oh, yeah,
and
great.
Harold Gould and Ed Asner.
Yeah,
and,
well, that's what I meant.
Yeah,
They come into the West Coast
They come
Jewish
into the
Theater.
West Coast Jewish Theater. They love working with us.
And have you thought of taking any of this work to off-Broadway?
Well, one of our plays, we did a play called Zero, and it was based on the story of Zero Mostel.
Oh.
And this play is
Not zero.
Yeah, right. Not the number zero.
Not zero.
No, but this moved to New York, and is still playing in New York, and so one of our shows did move to New York.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you came, Howard.
I'm so glad I was asked.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Joan.
And don't go away. We'll be right back with filmmaker Gabor Kalman. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. I'm back again with filmmaker Gabor Kalman, who was born and raised in Hungary. He's been an adjunct professor at Occidental College, Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, and USC School of Cinematic Arts. Gabor earned a master's degree from Stanford University, a bachelor's from the University of Berkeley in physiology, we're going to find out, and attended the School of Pharmacy in Budapest University. He's a Fulbright scholar. He's been a judge and a panelist at film festivals around the world. And were you planning to be a doctor? Is that why you were in pharmacy?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit? How'd we get from
Early.
pharmacy to award-winning documentaries?
Oh, that's an interesting story, and I tried to say it quickly. Okay, I was at Stanford working for my PhD, and we saw a lot of films made by the pharmaceutical industry for medical education.
Oh.
And they were dreadful. And I always wondered that either they were made by filmmakers who didn't quite comprehend the subject, or they were scientists who didn't know how to make films. So I decided to take some classes in filmmaking, and that's when my life changed.
That's very interesting, because I had a guest on who was a photographer at the dental school. And I went, how could you become an art photographer, and why did they need pictures at the dental school? Same thing in what you're talking about. So we forget that all these other, you have to cut that.
Okay.
All these other, disciplines, that's what I was looking for. Okay.
Okay, so hold on. So
Just start there.
so we forget. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
We forget that all these other disciplines need some kind of photography or documentation.
This was a long time ago, and today I think they're both filmmaking and science are much more sophisticated and closer together. But that was a real problem.
It was an interesting thing. You created the David Wolper Award. What was that about, and to whom and for what?
Well, after teaching for many, many years and seeing wonderful student films, I felt that they were not adequately appreciated or even shown to a public. And I was very involved with IDA, the International Documentary Association. So I went to see David and I said, hey, would like to have an award for student films. And he was very enthusiastic. And that was a good 25 years ago, and it's still going.
He would have been enthusiastic because he loved to teach people things, didn't he? He liked that idea. And that was a wonderful combination that you did. You were a Fulbright scholar. Did you serve outside of the United States?
Yes, actually, I had 2 Fulbrights, and it sent me back to where I came from.
Oh, you went back to Hungary?
Yes, I was teaching at the film school originally in 1994, and then I get another Fulbright in 2008.
Ah.
And that's when I was sort of combined the trip with starting to work on this film.
Well, when you get the second Fulbright, is it always in the same place? Would
No.
it be in the same
No,
place?
it could have been anywhere.
Could have been.
But they invited me back, so it was easier.
You had this status of senior specialist.
Yes.
What does that mean?
I'm not sure. I think they counted my gray hair.
Senior specialist.
I think for the second time around, that's automatically.
And this was the beginning, I guess, of your film, There Was Once. You've done other films. You had made many
yes,
before
yes.
that. What were those subject matters?
Well, initially, because my science background, I worked for a television program in San Francisco, 70s.
Let's not talk about
And it was
no,
called,
just kidding.
It was called Science in Action.
Oh, so you started doing documentaries then?
Then I started make independent films. But teaching full time and making films full time wasn't always easy. But this is something that I'm very proud of. And
could you utilize your students, the people you were teaching, while you were making your own films, or not so much? No?
Yes and no. It's an ethical thing too. I feel that as long as I get paid for something, the students should get paid. And if I pay someone, I might as well pay someone who is more experienced.
I see. Yeah, it is kind of like a seesaw there, isn't it? You started this project, There Was Once, while you were still a Fulbright. But how did you actually find this person that you were who's the center of attraction in this film?
Actually, this is the first time I didn't find the film. The film found me. That is this incredible woman by the name of Gyöngy Mago, who's a history teacher in a high school in the city I was born in, Hungary.
Was right in your own city?
And when she was doing some research in local history, and she just learned that used to be a Jewish community there once. There was once a Jewish community there, which she didn't know about.
And she's not Jewish.
She's not Jewish. She's in her 40s. And she started to track down people. And she found my name, believe it or not, on the official death list. I was 9 years old, and I was listed to be terminated.
A list from your community.
They did.
And you were on it. And obviously your parents must have been on it. Your family must have been on it. So then what did she do?
She contacted me without knowing what I do for a living, and I was just so touched by the fact that somebody who's not Jewish, a young teacher, is doing this 65 years later, and I already knew that I was going to go there to teach. I said, would you mind if I make a film about you? And I had no idea what the film is going to be like, how I'm going to get money. I've never done this before. And it turned out to be just a fantastically interesting, very wonderful woman.
Well, how do you do it? Let's talk about it. You find this woman, you decide you want to make a film. Do you just do interviews with her? Who do you interview? And do you write it before you start it?
Well, I researched it, but this is something when people ask me how long did it take me to write this, to do this film.
You write it first.
I usually say it's about 65 years.
All your life, right?
It's part of my life, and it's the first time, too, I appear in front of the cameras because I feel I'm connected with the subject, not only as a filmmaker, but because I came from there.
When you start writing, you've written something, it's in your mind. You go out and you start looking for pictures and people who were around at the time, and you're interviewing them. Does the slant change from what you originally thought you were going to do?
Always. I think that's inherent in documentary filmmaking.
That's what I wondered. Is it?
That's the beauty of it, too, in my opinion. I always tell my students, yes, write what you know, research it, but be flexible. It's always changing. But how to find people, you were asking. Unfortunately, it wasn't very difficult, but because not that many people survived, and even the survivors are getting old. So she organized this memorial for this lost community, where a lot of people came, some survivors, some second generation, third generation.
She actually organized something.
And
were families still there? There were still families?
No, there's no Jews living there for almost 60 years.
There have been no Jews living there?
No.
It's like they wonder, what is a Jew, right? I mean,
exactly.
They don't know.
Exactly.
And we're not much different, or they're not much different from anybody, from each other. But that was interesting that she had that verve to look into it.
Particularly because the climate in the last few years in Hungary is really shifting very rapidly to the right. And I wouldn't hesitate to say to the extreme right. So she didn't get a hell of a lot of support.
Yeah.
And against that climate, what she's done is even more remarkable.
Why did she become so interested? Miss Mago?
Mago is her last name. Gyöngyi, nobody can pronounce it. Yeah. But yes. She said all her life she was always interested in someone who is sort of down or discriminated against or not a mainstream. So when she found this Jewish community that it existed, and not everybody wanted to talk to her about.
She was very insistent, wasn't she?
Very, very.
One of the things that I think when I talked to you earlier is there's a unique style that you've dealt with where it comes to loss of memory or kind of helping that memory come out. What did you do when you had to put it on film?
This is a great question, and you haven't even seen the film yet. Yes, the memory is always very important to me.
I went on and looked at little excerpts of it, so I know, that there were these things that you had to do, almost tricks that you had to find.
Well, first of all, as I said, there's not too many of us who I could interview, that is the survivors. And some of them were in their 90s, and several of them already passed since we finished the film. So, but I had to travel around a little bit to Canada and the East Coast, and in Hungary, some of them. But it's something from my previous work too, when I was researching anything related with the Holocaust, that I take whatever people tell me it's their memory, I take it as history, because that's what they lived with. And often I was sitting face to face with someone doing an interview, just like what you're doing now, and I knew that it wasn't quite right. Not that they made up stories or not that they were not telling the truth, but either the time or the place didn't quite click, and I knew that. But if this is what that person has been living with for the last 60 years, that's her truth or his truth.
That's his truth.
So
that's very poignant, because you can't rewrite their history.
Exactly.
It's brilliant, and it has this minimalism along with it. And I think you did that specifically to bring out the poignancy, I guess.
It wasn't difficult. There is something when one survivor interviews the other, there is something else happening. It's not just journalism.
No, it's a totally different thing. And you had to deal with that, but you also had to deal with the idea of putting music in, doing something like that.
Yes, and
how
music,
do you do that?
Music is a little unusual. First of all, you know, can't help putting your own taste, but first I knew what not to do. I didn't want klezmer. I didn't want Hungarian folk music, and I didn't want violins to make the audience cry. So what did I do? I have a friend who's an experimental composer, Mark So, and he did a rather far-out score, which I think it works.
But that's interesting.
The subject is pretty far out.
It's interesting, though, because what you're talking about, klezmer or violins, really stirs up another emotion that would be different, really, from what you were trying to show.
Also, you know, I don't think this film is a Holocaust film. I think this film is about someone teaching tolerance, what one person can do. It's fighting prejudice, and it could have been any other part of the world, and I think that's a focus, and that's what she's coming here, as I might have mentioned.
Yes, I was just going to say, the Museum of Tolerance on Pico Boulevard in Los Angeles has taken on this whole series of Holocaust films, and yours is one of them that will be featured. And I think it's great that they open it up to the public, and then they bring the subjects to do Q&As.
Not only that, they're giving her an award.
Oh, that's
she's
fabulous.
Going to get a Medal of Honor, and I think that's what she's all about. Her incredible work, and she's actually, whatever she learned or the whole process, she's going to her classroom and talks to the students.
Well, this should be shown in classrooms too, so it has to be shown around the country to show what you were talking about, tolerance and understanding of people.
I hope so, and we just finished the film, so no one's seen it yet.
Oh, so we're excited about it.
But I hope every high school will buy it.
I think so. Gabor, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
And you keep writing to jaquinn1@aol.com and 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 90017. See you next time.